Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a moment in history where a seemingly unstoppable ancient superpower, the most perfected military machine the world had ever seen, collided with a force that just completely shattered their established rules of war. We're looking at a single, brilliantly defined king who forced Rome to rewrite its very protocols for survival.
Okay, so put yourself in the year 101 AD. Imagine the most powerful army in history. These guys were fresh off conquering Carthage, humbling Greece, and burying Egypt. Their legionaries were quite literally human war machines, forged across 3 continents. They operated with this absolute, unshakable certainty that no one on earth could stop them. And then they crossed the Danube River. Almost overnight, these hardened veterans are experiencing total, collective panic on the front lines against a completely unknown tribe. And you might be wondering why. Well, it was because of what was happening to their shields. You see, for 5 whole centuries, the Roman army had built its entire combat strategy around one absolute truth: the shield holds. The Roman scutum, which was this huge rectangular shield made of layered wood covered in leather, reinforced with an iron boss, and weighing up to 10 kilograms, it was basically invulnerable. It could stop spears, swords, arrows, rocks, you name it. But suddenly, it couldn't stop this new enemy.
To really understand the sheer shock to the Roman system here, you just have to look at their track record. During Rome's 5 biggest military campaigns right before this, and we're talking massive wars in Britain, on the Rhine, against the Parthians, the Roman army made exactly 0 structural modifications to its standard armor. 5 massive campaigns, 5 totally different enemies, 0 changes. But during this Dacian campaign, they were forced into a complete bottom-up armor redesign in just a matter of weeks. Veterans who trusted their layered wood shields with their actual lives suddenly realized their standard equipment was terrifyingly useless.
So what was the problem? The crucial point of failure was this horrific weapon called the Dacian Falx. Now, it wasn't a brand new weapon to the world, but it was disastrously new to Rome. When the very first legionaries came back from the front lines in the autumn of 101 AD, military doctors were looking at wounds they had literally never seen before. The thing about the Falx is that it didn't strike flat, it hooked. Its curved geometry allowed it to reach right over the top edge of the Roman shield. Just simple, brutal physics. It caused these unprecedented, clean, downward cuts that sliced straight through that impenetrable shield and went right into the arm holding it. It completely 100% invalidated Rome's core combat strategy.
Rome's response was, honestly, extraordinarily desperate. Right in the middle of that very same campaign, military engineers somehow developed and mass-distributed a totally new armor component called the manica. This was an articulated guard made of overlapping iron and leather segments. It covered the legionaries' right arm, their sword arm, all the way from the wrist right up to the shoulder while still letting them move freely. This was incredibly sophisticated, massively expensive, and totally unprecedented in 500 years of Roman military history. They were handing out brand new armor during an active conflict just to keep their men alive.
And what's really fascinating about this is that we actually have the visual evidence today. Trajan's Column, which is this massive monument in Rome, documents this with incredible forensic precision. If you look at the stone carvings of scenes from before the Dacian battles, none of the legionaries are wearing the manica. But look at the reliefs from the Dacian campaign. There it is. But here's the really crazy part. The column proves this wasn't an army-wide upgrade. Only the frontline soldiers, the specific troops who had to look the Falx in the eye, wore it. It's a literal stone record of rapid adaptation.
But that initial shock at the Danube, that was really just the opening act. Over the next 5 years, this conflict escalated from a deeply deceptive peace treaty into a full-blown existential war. We talked about the shock of 101 AD. Well, by 102, Rome technically wins the First Dacian War, and they sign a peace treaty. But, as we'll see, those years between 102 and 105 AD were anything but peaceful behind the scenes, ultimately leading to a massive counterattack and a final brutal siege in 106. Let's look closer at that treaty in 102 AD. On paper, you'd think the war was completely over. The Dacian king, Decebalus, publicly signed the agreement in front of the Roman legates. He followed every strict protocol Rome demanded. There's no record of him resisting or negotiating or even complaining. He just publicly accepted what were obviously designed to be incredibly humiliating terms. Rome patted themselves on the back and called it a victory. But what Decebalus did next was just pure strategic genius. He didn't look at this as a defeat at all. He saw it as an opportunity.
This is where we get the greatest dramatic irony of the whole conflict.
Rome demanded that Decebalus surrender his weapons, tear down his fortresses, hand over deserters, and crucially, they insisted he accept Roman military engineers, sent directly by Emperor Trajan to supervise the whole thing. But Decebalus, he didn't comply, he exploited them. Rome basically gift-wrapped the exact experts he needed. Decebalus gave these Roman engineers translators, put them up in nice lodging, and let them work freely, while his own people watched their every single move. He used the gold that Rome somehow failed to confiscate to fund huge upgrades, and he used Rome's own engineers to steal their advanced building technology.
So instead of surrendering, Decebalus spent 3 full years of peace just milking these Roman experts for every drop of knowledge they had. When archaeologists look at the Dacian capital during this time, they see an absolute explosion of construction. The Dacians learned the principles of sloped wall construction. They mastered complex angle calculations to deflect siege projectiles. They figured out how to build optimized observation towers. They literally integrated Roman hydraulic tech right into the natural mountain rock to build these deep water storage systems and massive grain silos so they could survive a long siege. He essentially built an impenetrable superfortress right under Rome's nose, paid for by Rome's Miss Gold, and designed using Rome's own engineering.
And then, boom, the trap snapped shut. In 105 AD, Decebalus struck back. And to be clear, this was not some random impulsive raid. This was the result of 3 years of methodical, calculated preparation utilizing a completely reorganized army. He specifically targeted the Roman provinces of Moesia and Pannonia. These were territories right on the Danube that Rome considered absolutely untouchable. They were the administrative core of the empire. And he timed it perfectly, hitting them while Emperor Trajan was all the way back in Rome, distracted by Senate affairs. This was a very loud, very deliberate message. I never accepted your treaty. I exploited it.
150,000. Now, to put that staggering number into perspective, that is the largest army Rome had ever sent on a single campaign. That's the force Trajan brought back to Dacia in 105 AD. He wasn't taking any chances this time. He brought specialized engineers, auxiliary cavalry from 12 different provinces, and he even brought Apollodorus of Damascus, literally the most important architect in the entire empire, just to build a permanent, massive bridge over the Danube. That immense, overwhelming retaliation tells us something fundamental. Rome was genuinely terrified. Their response wasn't proportional at all. It was existential. They weren't just looking to win a few battles and sign another treaty. Absolutely not. They needed total eradication. And frankly, Decebalus, sitting up in his new Roman-engineered mountain fortress, fully expected them to bring everything they had. Fast forward to the summer of 106 AD. The Roman army finally reaches the Dacian capital of Sarmizegetusa. Trajan's approach to this siege was completely clinical. No improvisation, just methodical destruction. Step 1, cut off the external aqueducts. Step 2, block all the mountain roads with permanent garrisons so no one gets in or out. Step 3, set up fortified camps at all 4 cardinal points around the fortress. And Step 4, just wait. Rome realized they didn't need to throw away lives storming those newly engineered walls. They just needed to starve them out. Because of the crazy history here, this siege wasn't about bravery on either side. It was literally a mathematical equation, and everyone knew the solution. Both sides knew the exact limit of the fortress's resistance. Why? Because the very same Roman engineers who supervised its construction just 3 years earlier were literally standing right there outside the walls. They knew exactly how much food and water was inside, making the fall of the city not a question of if, but a mathematical certainty. But right before that mathematical equation reached zero, when everyone knew the fortress was done for, Decebalus did something pretty remarkable. He didn't wave a white flag. He didn't mount some glorious, suicidal final cavalry charge. Instead, he summoned his remaining nobles for a meeting that went on for hours. He sat there and calmly organized his legacy. He gave incredibly strict instructions on what to burn, what treasures to hide from the Romans, and what cultural artifacts to preserve for future generations. Once all of that was secured, he left his capital behind and slipped away east, deep into the mountains he knew better than anyone else. So, the hunt was on. Decebalus was moving fast with a very small group, but even a small group leaves a trail, and the Roman cavalry unit sent to find him, they were some of the best in the entire empire. This was the Moesian auxiliary cavalry, commanded by a guy named Tiberius Claudius Maximus. These were hardcore veterans whose specific specialty was tracking and capturing targets in rough, mountainous terrain. They picked up the trail easily and tracked the Dacian king right into a remote mountain clearing.
Actually, we have the primary source documentation of exactly how this ended, carved right onto the funerary stele of Tiberius Claudius Maximus himself. It gives us the cold, stark facts with that typical, dry military economy of words. They caught up to him, and he took his own life before they could grab him. But when you look at later consolidated historical records, pieced together from multiple eyewitness testimonies, you start to see the incredible, silent tension of those final seconds.
Let's just pause here for a second to really appreciate the gravity of this moment. When Decebalus saw the Roman cavalry closing in, he didn't beg for his life. He didn't raise his hands to try and negotiate terms. With the exact same eerie, unsettling calmness that he used to sign that fake peace treaty 4 years earlier, he just drew his curved sword and put it to his own neck. A Roman general later wrote that in that specific moment, those Roman soldiers, veterans of 3 brutal wars who had watched friends die all over the known world, they literally froze. They didn't stop because an officer yelled halt. They stopped because their bodies physically wouldn't move. Standing there watching a man who unflinchingly chose death over being paraded as a trophy in Rome, they recognized a level of raw courage that the Roman military didn't even have a word for.
Now, Rome did get Decebalus' head. They brought it back and displayed it on the steps of the Capitol as their ultimate proof. Emperor Trajan even threw a massive triumph, complete with 123 days of back-to-back festivals. And yet, if you look at the historical accounts, they suggest Trajan never truly felt he got the victory he was looking for. So we really have to ask ourselves, when the invincible Roman war machine is forced to redesign its own armor in a panic, when it's utterly outsmarted at the peace table, and when its most hardened, ruthless veterans are left completely paralyzed in all of